Slasher movies. To many, they are the absolute goat of the horror genre. To many, they are B tier trash. Me, I think they swing the spectrum both ways. But I can tell you, there is no subgenre that has ever impacted the main genre it's from the way that the slasher movie has. Without the likes of the slashers, like, say, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, or Friday the 13th, we wouldn't have the modern horror movies that everyone loves. These movies paved the way for things like Predator, Alien, The Thing, Hellraiser, Chucky, just to name a few. Like, there's no... The impact that the slasher movie has had on the horror genre as a whole could be an entire Halloween video unto itself. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. No, today's topic for Halloween is my personal opinion on which 2000 slasher remake handled the killer better. Out of, as I just showed you, these four. Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Actually, fun fact, this box set of Nightmare on Elm Street does not include the 2010 remake, so we're just gonna pretend that it does, and pretend that I did not do anything illegal to watch it. Okay. So... Oh, I just dropped one. So, starting off, let's talk about how I'm going to be ranking these, because there's a lot of different ways you can do a ranking of movies. First off, we're not looking at the movies as a whole, okay? Because none of them are very good. They are very 2000s horror movie. And I don't hate a lot of the movies that came out in the 2000s in the horror genre. You had some great ones like Scream. What's the other one with Matthew Lillard? Always skips my mind. 13 Ghosts. 13 Ghosts was great. So bad. One of those movies where it's like so bad it's good, but it was really good. But for each one of those, you had stuff like The American Grudge, The American Ring, The American Pulse. A lot of remade stuff dumbed down for Americans. Not okay, America. Stop freaking doing that. But we're going to actually be ranking these we're going to look at each killer individually from each movie and rank them on 3 criteria. The first is their design. What is Jason without his iconic hockey mask? The second is going to be their personality. I don't have a Freddy Krueger action figure, but what is Freddy without his quippy one-liners and really freaking creepy and hilarious kills? And then the third is going to be, overall, how interesting is this interpretation of the character? How well does this version of the character hold up in comparison to other things? Like, how does Rob Zombie's Michael Myers hold up to the original classic Michael Myers? Is it an interesting version that should have had a movie be told? Was it necessary? Let's figure that out. We're going to start in chronological order with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Then we'll go on to Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, and then Friday the 13th. Fun fact, I didn't actually realize it until I was doing the research for this video. All 4 of the movies I just listed in chronological order, their remakes came out in the exact order that their original movies came out. So if you're ever at a party and you want to bore somebody away from you, let them know. So let's get started with the very first one, and that is Leatherface. So starting off with Leatherface, we start with his design, and first of all, I feel like the entire movie overall is just really grimy and dirty, which, you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, pretty grimy and dirty movie overall. It was filmed in the hot Texas sun. They didn't have a whole lot of protection, so overall, kind of fitting. I just feel like the whole costume could have been a little less grimy, I guess. I don't really know what I'm getting at here. I also think that without his mask, he is really gross. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if we've ever actually seen Leatherface without his mask, at least in the original series. I'm sure that there's probably a couple times in like different remakes or whatever where he has appeared without his mask. And he looks really gross in this one without his mask. But overall, I rate the design fairly evenly. Like, Leatherface is kind of a hard one to screw up. Just make sure he's wearing a mask of other people's skin, kind of pot bellied, wearing what looks like a butcher's apron or something, and presto changeo, you have Leatherface. It's not really an easy design to screw up. On to his personality. We get an actually interesting look at Leatherface in this movie. So, first of all, he's very meticulous, I guess. Like, we actually get to see him like preparing to tear apart bodies and whatnot, and he's very like orderly. He knows what he's doing when he's going to do it. He starts, you know, pulling teeth out and all that. Like, there's shots of him ripping apart a body, and it's very like meticulously done. It's honestly kind of weird in a way. Um, we also, you know, standard slasher movie thing. He is a sadistic psycho. The man puts salt on a dude's stump leg that he just cut off. That's horrifying. Oh my god. And then he's also very childlike. Like, I know the whole thing with Leatherface is that, like, mentally he's not all up there. They never explicitly say what's wrong with him, but, like, he's very obviously depicted as being extremely child in a grown man's body kind of way. And that's kind of more evident in this movie. Like, there's literally a scene where he's listening to his mom and dad, or his mom and I think dad, brother, something. What was the sheriff name in this movie? I can never figure that out. But they're fighting, and he's in the hallway just like rocking back and forth, kind of terrified. I'm gonna take a drink here out of my Friday the 13th cup. And he's rocking back and forth, kind of terrified. And he's very like, something about him is he's just very childish. But beyond that, he isn't. There's nothing really to say about him. He's a slasher villain. He doesn't have a personality and whatnot. So, you know, there's not really much I can honestly say in regards to this version of Leatherface. Moving on to how interesting was this interpretation? The answer, not very. But that's not a slight at Leatherface, because Leatherface was always kind of a tool for his family. His family were always like the real villains, and Leatherface was just kind of their tool for him. They used him to, you know, kill people, bring in the bodies, tear apart the bodies, and whatnot. He was never the, despite what the modern remakes will tell you, he's never the focus of the movies. The movie's focus was almost exclusively on his family, and he was just like the muscle, more or less. So overall, this was not a really interesting interpretation for Leatherface. The movie was not very interesting at all. I mean, beyond the opening, which everyone remembers, where they pick up the girl on the side of the road and then she blows her head off. That's probably the only interesting part of this movie. Probably the only part you should really watch. Now we move on to our next one, which is Michael Myers. So Michael Myers is going to have to suffer a little bit from my own personal biases, and that's mostly just because, like, I never really clicked with the Halloween movies the way I did with, like, other movies, like Friday and Nightmare. But that's no slight against, you know, Halloween. The first one's great, okay? Like, the first one's always a classic. But this one, I didn't really care for too much. But this isn't about the movies, this is about the killers. So let's start off with the design. First of all, I feel like the long hair is just kind of... Rob Zombie loves to do long hair on his characters. I don't really get it. I mean, I kind of do. It makes him look like rock starry, I guess. Rob Zombie is a rock star. Maybe that's kind of what he's going for. But overall, it didn't really work for me. You don't see him with the long hair very often. thankfully. Um, the mask I thought was really good. It was the classic, William Shatner mask, but the way that it was like cracked and broken up along the face added to like an age to it, and I felt like that was a really good designs. But most of the design, like with Leatherface, it's hard to screw up Michael Myers. Like he's just a dude. Get the William Shatner mask on him. Get the big jumpsuit. Make him big dude, big muscly man. Pin people to the wall with a kitchen knife, which totally impractical, but whatever. You do you, bro. Um, it's not an easy design to screw up. You'd have to actively try. The new ones. Oh, sorry. Don't know what that was about. On to the personality. This version of Michael Myers kills animals. I deduct points from that because I love animals. Bad. Shame on you. Beyond that, he is like I like the effort they put in to try and make him like not so much like the effort they put into making him like a tortured soul instead of someone who just snaps one day is kind of interesting. But I feel like this is a more like a tangent real quick into the how interesting. I feel like it doesn't work that well, but we'll get into that more later on. Um, he's also very creepy and psychotic. Like he very often just like does some really creepy shit throughout the movie. There's a part where he's just pounding on the door to a freaking dude in a stall, and it's just like I get that it's trying to build up suspense, but it can't help but make him feel really weird. And then he obviously is a psycho. The man goes on like mass killing sprees and just like snaps in an instant, and it's like never explained why he snaps like that. Like, is he traumatized from his life? Is he like just screwed up in the head? They never go far enough into that, which again, subject for later. He's also kind of like Leatherface, a little childish. Points in the movie where he like actively plays with his victims. Like there's a part where these two people are getting it on in his abandoned house that he grew up in, and he kills the boyfriend and dresses up in like a classic sheet ghost costume, goes upstairs to the chick, and then like kind of toys with her for a minute until he gives her an empty beer, and then while she's trying to drink the beer and realizing that it's empty, he takes it off and then kills her. And then there's another part where he like attacks a girl who was babysitting and she was messing with her boyfriend, kills the boyfriend, hangs him up from the ceiling, shoves a jack-o'-lantern onto his head, and then you see him like when it's revealed that he's still in the house later on after his little sister gets there, he like walks up and just kind of playfully pushes the dude, makes him swing back and forth for a second before just walking off. I think that's a I think that's a really interesting kind of way to take his personality because throughout all of the stories of Michael Myers, he never gets to be a kid. Like he always snaps at some point when he's a child and starts killing people. And when that happens, he gets put in the mental ward or the mental hospital, and he never gets to be a child. So I think having him be a little bit not playful. I don't want to say playful. That sounds wrong. Having him be a little bit more childish, but not in the Leatherface way of child in a man's body, just like goofing around, kind of childish. Because like, isn't he supposed to only be in his like early 20s in this movie? It kind of makes sense in a way. I think it's a really interesting. I think it's a really interesting personality idea. So now, how interesting was this? As I think I pointed out, or I kind of hinted at a couple times earlier, the humanization elements were completely unnecessary. Like, Rob Zombie kind of makes it seem like he's going to humanize Michael, turn him into like some sort of misunderstood vigilante. Like throughout the entire movie, especially in the beginning, I felt like there were a couple people who kind of deserved it. Like there's one part where he's beating a bully with a branch. I don't know if he kills the bully or just like beats him until he's unconscious and then just leaves him there. But the bully's a douche to him like the entire time through the first part of the movie. So it's like, yeah, I understand. As someone who was bullied a lot as a kid, I kind of sympathize with that. Like the dude had it coming. And then like his dad, he kills his dad, and his dad was like a complete asshole. Like full stop. His dad was a horrible person. Constantly like insulting him, belittling him, like mentally abusing his mom, mentally abusing his sister. Like he was not a good person. So like he kind of deserved it. Like I'm not gonna lie, he deserved something at least. Maybe not death, but he deserved something. And then like the two security guards when he's an adult and he snaps, and it sends him on his killing spree. They were in his room raping a woman who was literally like, as they described it, mentally not there. Like she didn't even realize what they were doing until they had her on the bed and were doing that. So yeah, again, they deserved it. But like he kind of like he loses any sympathy when he starts killing people indiscriminately. Like there's a part where he kills a character played by Danny Trejo who was nothing but nice to him throughout the entire first part of the movie. Like we only get to see 2 or 3 scenes with them together, but he's talking to Michael, he's calling him Mikey, he's being nice to him, and then Michael basically drowns him and then crushes him with a TV. You lose any sympathy you had for me, or I had for you right there. Like that's completely uncalled for. And overall, I feel like this interpretation doesn't change much for Michael overall, and it doesn't really do anything new with the character. It's just kind of like it feels like a lot of the parts in the beginning just kind of waste your time because it doesn't matter. He's still going to become like a psychopathic killer at the end, and whether you feel for him a little bit or not, he doesn't. It doesn't change very much. Like the only difference is like you see he grew up in a really bad home and then he snaps rather than just when he was a kid he snapped and killed his sister. So it doesn't really change a whole lot. Moving on to our next movie, we have Friday the 13th with Jason Voorhees. So Jason Voorhees, again, much like Michael, is going to be suffering a lot from my personal biases. I love Jason. Okay, I got him on the shirt. Let me stand up. You guys can see the shirt. I got him on the shirt. I got the mug, the travel mug. I've got the dope ass part 4. I think it is part New Blood. Which one was New Blood? 4 or 5? One of the two. I know one of them early on didn't actually have Jason, but this is Zombie Jason. This is Zombie Jason action figure. So my biases are going to show pretty heavily here. I'm going to try and keep it as objective as I can. And let's start off with the design. So the first design that we see Jason in before he dons the iconic hockey mask, he's wearing kind of like a burlap sack over his head. And I feel like that's pretty like fairly decent. It's a callback to the second movie where he was going around with the burlap sack. I don't think it's till the third one that he actually dons the hockey mask. Friday the 13th has a very slow burn throughout the first couple movies as they're figuring out their footing and whatnot. So I feel like the first design, it's fairly decent. Like he's a tall, intimidating man either way. We do get a couple shots of him without his mask on before he kills this really creepy weirdo dude. And his face is pretty gross. That's kind of on par for Jason though. Like I don't know if we got to see Leatherface without his mask on. I already said that once. We have seen Jason a couple times without a mask on, and it's always been gross and weird. But overall, I feel like the design they landed on with the hockey mask, pretty solid. Like I said, like with Leatherface and Michael, hard to screw up Jason, but I feel like they went the extra mile to give him a little bit more design overall that makes it just that much more solid, in my opinion. So moving on to the personality. This is a very interesting version of Jason personality wise. So first of all, Jason's very observant in this movie. He's seen several times just watching people and studying them and seeing what they do. There's a part where he catches on that Sam Winchester is somewhere near his camp because he left his bag sitting there. It wasn't out in the open either. It was like by some canoes and shit. And Jason's immediate reaction is, someone's probably hiding under these canoes. I'm going to tear them down. That's smart. Jason is also very creative in this movie. He's got some uh, overall pretty effective kills, but my favorite is definitely the one in the beginning where he ties a woman's sleeping bag up to a tree over a campfire, and then when her boyfriend comes to save her, he catches his leg in a bear trap. That's cool as hell. That's not a variation of Jason we get to see a lot. But overall, I don't think the personality really changed that much. He's still psychopathic killer, obsessed with his mother. So the personality, didn't really change a whole lot. Now, how interesting is this interpretation? The answer, very. Uh, I already kind of mentioned like he's very creative. He's also like kind of a wild man in a way. Like he's been living at Crystal Lake for years. We get to see like he has tunnels underneath Crystal Lake that get him everywhere. He's very creative. He uses like different survival techniques. He uses bows. He uses bear traps. He's ambushes people. Like he's really good at basically just being like the human version of Jason. Like Jason in this movie is overall really solid interpretation. I love this version of Jason. I really kind of wish that this one got a sequel because the only one of these that actually got a sequel was Rob Zombie's Halloween. And I feel like this variation of Jason, I mean, he dies in the end. Obviously, he's a slasher villain. But I feel like this variation of Jason, if they would have been able to like secure a sequel, I could have very easily seen him like escaping into Crystal Lake and then like just coming back a couple years later and maybe tracking these kids down somewhere in maybe Manhattan. Maybe they go to Jason Takes Manhattan. I don't know. Overall, though, I feel like this was a very interesting version of Jason. I really liked it. The fact that he was keeping a woman hostage because she looked like his mother was also an interesting change. Like most of the time, Jason's just a freaking murderer. Like nobody thinks different about that. But the fact that he's so obsessed with his mother that he would keep someone around and his own mother's severed head just because she looks like his mother, it's pretty interesting. And like I said, I wish we could have got to explore some more of this Jason. With that said, let's move on to our final movie in this lineup, Nightmare on Elm Street with Freddy Krueger. So Freddy Krueger is also going to get some personal bias from me, but it's not going to be the personal bias that Jason got. Because Freddy is one of my favorite slasher villains of all time. Okay, like Robert Englund, phenomenal. Like his face, his voice, he's so iconic as Freddy. So I'm gonna be a little bit harsh here in regards to this new Freddy. Also, as a fun personal fact, I had never seen this remake before doing this video. Um, I'd seen the other three a couple times. I think the most I've seen is the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which just I wouldn't wish that on anybody. I'm sorry. But I never actually got to see this one. So this is basically like my first viewing thoughts overall. So let's start with the design. He's ugly. Dead stop. He's ugly. But he's not ugly in the good way, if there is such a thing as that. Like, the original face of Freddy is very iconic. He's burnt, he's got, like, the skin and everything, and they try to make this one look good. He's got, like, parts of his cheek missing with, like, CGI. I just feel like they don't go far enough with it. Like, he doesn't have as much of a defined face as Robert Englund, and I feel like overall he kind of suffers a little bit from that. They didn't lean into what could have made this actor like stand out enough, in my opinion. Voice is also really his voice is also really cringy, annoying, I guess, in a way. I don't like I don't like his voice for this, and I feel like overall it's not strong enough, if that's the right phrasing for it. Um, he doesn't feel like forceful when he talks. He feels like okay. So there was a video I watched a few months ago, or talking about like Nero versus Dante. Someone said Nero had very big little brother energy, and whereas Dante was just naturally cool. I feel like this version of Freddy has very big little brother energy, if that like makes any sense at all. Overall, like, I just don't care too much for this design. I feel like they didn't go as hard as they should have with the face. I feel like he could have been a little bit more forceful with his voice. They could have done more with this version of Freddy. And I would have loved to have seen more practical effects. It felt like the entire face was almost CGI. And I didn't care for that at all. Moving on to his personality. Once again, I have to deduct points. He kills an animal in this movie. Even if it's a dream, I'm pretty sure her dog still died. We never see the dog again. That's wrong. Don't do that. Overall, though, I think that while he is still really freaking just gross and creepy, there's a part where he licks a girl's face and calls her his sweet little girl and his favorite and all that. He's very Freddy light, I guess. His jokes and comebacks and witty one-liners, they're not as good as the original ones. And I don't know if that's a problem for like the script, or maybe he just didn't deliver the lines that well. I just felt like the whole thing about this movie, it feels like it needs more time. It was not his personality just wasn't all that interesting. I'd have to give him some points though, because out of all four of the killers we're discussing now, fan it out a little bit better. Yeah, you get the point. Out of all four of the killers we're discussing now, he's the only one that actually freaking talks. So give him some points for that. So moving on to how interesting this interpretation was. Well, his kills are kind of sucky. And I feel like I have to point that out because Freddy has some horrifyingly iconic kills. Like, just in the first movie alone, there's the scene where Johnny Depp gets pulled into his bed and they shoot out the fountain of blood everywhere. That's a cool kill. That's iconic. For a reason. The, like, most iconic one I can think of that sticks out in my head is, like, he shoves his arm through a dude. Kudos. You did what, like, Kano can do. Yay. So overall, it doesn't feel like they went far with his powers in this movie. Felt like he was a very watered down version of Freddy. I think I said that. I'm pretty sure I said that already. But my biggest gripe with this adaptation, this interpretation, whatever you want to call it, they set it up like he was an innocent man who got framed for a horrible deed. But they didn't follow through with it. And there's even a part, like I mentioned earlier, where he was licking a girl's face. That's before they even try and set up that he was originally innocent. By the time the character's like, oh, you took the words of a couple 5-year-olds, we would have said anything, blah, 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 blah. You're like, yeah, but like, he's like really creepy. Why would you believe anything he says? I feel like going the innocent but vengeful route could have been like an interesting version of the character, because in the original Nightmare, Freddy was a child molester. He was a horrible dude. He did horrible things. He burned. He died. Parents took it into their own hands, and then he like made a pact with some demons. I think it was. I don't remember the exact thing. And he came back as a dream demon, haunting people's nightmares as long as people remembered him, as long as people feared him. He could not die, and I feel like if they would have actually taken the complete inverse, been like, yeah, this version of Freddy, completely innocent, didn't do anything, got framed, parents killed him unjustly, and now he's back for revenge. That would have been an interesting version of the character to explore. Like, I would have been down for seeing that. That would have been cool. So I don't think like they went far enough in that element for me personally. I feel like if they would have explored that a little bit more, they would have set that up a little bit better. Maybe he doesn't start being a creepy weirdo in the beginning to kind of throw it all off. Hell, even if you just set it up and be like, oh, he was innocent, and you got the kids believing it, and then like later on you twist and you're like, oh, he was actually guilty the whole time. Like, that would have been interesting, or at least a little bit, I guess. But just setting it up, but never actually having the guts to go through with it, doesn't work for me. So I feel like this interpretation just kind of falls a little flat. So now we're going to go over all three categories and rank all the killers based on which one I think was the worst to which one I think was handled the best. Starting off with design, I definitely think the worst design was Freddy. Like, hands down, Freddy's design is iconic for a reason, and they strayed too far away from it without making it original enough that it kind of ruined it for me. From there, I think the next design would have to be Michael's, because while I don't really care for the long hair covering his face and all that, I feel like the entire design with the mask and everything, it's decent. It makes enough changes to make it original and unique, and it stays true enough to the classic one to be just a really good design. And for second place, we're going to give it to Leatherface because, like I said, Leatherface is a hard design to screw up. All you got to do is make him creepy, leathery, human face thing, and give him a butcher's apron. This version of Leatherface haunted my nightmares as a kid because it was the first Texas Chainsaw I ever saw, and I thought the design was really freaking creepy and scary. So I got to give him points for that. And then, obviously, at number one is Jason. Jason's design is incredibly hard to screw up. You literally have to try to screw up Jason's design. New Halloween's. Sorry, something in my throat. Um, but overall, I feel like in terms of designs, that is how I would rank them. And Jason obviously takes the cake, not just because he's my favorite character, my favorite slasher overall, but also because like I said, the design's solid enough. You get to see basically three versions of Jason, and not just like the Michael Myers one where he's just putting on some different masks or whatever, but like he wears the clown mask when he kills his family, and then like we get to see one other mask that he wears before he goes back to the William Shatner one. You get to see a burlap sack Michael or Jason, to see a burlap sack Jason, Jason without the mask on, and then Jason with a hockey mask. I think it's overall a great showing of his character, and the design's really solid. In terms of personality, last place is going to go Leatherface, because, like I said, Leatherface has always been a tool for his family. He was never really the focus of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, not in the way that the modern movies will try to have you think he is. After that, we will go Michael Myers, because Michael is kind of childish in this one, but more of a child trapped in a man's body, I said. And I feel like overall his personality, it's different enough to be interesting and also still calls back enough to the original. Second place we're going to give to Jason, because as much as I love how they used Jason in this movie, I feel like personality wise he is literally just a slasher villain. He doesn't offer much, and the only reason he places above the other two is because I feel like I said, Leatherface is kind of a tool for the plot. He's not really the focus. And then I think that the attempts to kind of humanize Michael Myers kind of fall flat. And then in first place, it's going to be Freddy. because, like I said, he's the only slasher villain that talks. Even though he's pretty bad at all the quips and everything, it's still, I guess, engaging enough to catch your attention to be interesting. I just kind of wish they would have went a little bit farther with that. And then in the last category of how interesting each interpretation is, last place is going to be Leatherface. Again, sorry Leatherface, you're just not that interesting of a slasher villain to me. After that, it's going to be Freddy, because I feel like Freddy, like I said already, they could have went farther with Freddy than they did, and I feel like if they would have stuck with the innocent but vengeful, it would have been more interesting. But overall, they just went with they chickened out. They did the creepy pedophile thing. Then we're gonna go to Michael Myers, because I feel like even though there are attempts to humanize him that do kind of fall flat, it does show a little bit more of like Michael is kind of just evil in this series. And that's always been kind of a thing with Michael Myers. He's always been, like, even in Dead by Daylight, he's called the shape of evil. He's literally referred to as just plain evil several times in each singular timeline of Halloween. And then at number one is Jason. I love what they did with Jason in this movie. Oh my freaking god, it was so cool. He was a freaking survival slasher killer. Like, I would have loved to have seen a sequel to that series, or to that movie. But overall, that's just my opinion on these. Which slasher villain do you guys think actually got handled better? Am I right? Am I wrong? Do you hate me? Do you love me? Tell me what you think in the comments below. And I will see you guys in the next Halloween special.